The Texans are in need of a win, and the Jaguars are coming to town looking to give it to them. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of The Bullpen.
To throw the punches away. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Touchdown for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to The Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is Tom Chabria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm missing Tank Dell. Every time I see the intro, I'm missing Tank Dell. Other than that, I mean, when you think Texans, Jags, you think Tank Dell. I mean, it was the genesis of Tank Dell. So
the Jaguars gave him his start by letting him literally run all over them. Can't wait to see him get back in the game and do that again. But I mean, there's a reason I leave it in there. There's a reason it hasn't been updated in solidarity with Tank Dell until he's healthy and beyond. So, yeah, it's always fun going into this Jaguars matchup and thinking back to how Tank played and looking forward to him being back next season. Let's look into the key matchups. This is the second time the Texans and Jaguars have played. There's a couple things that are different, but I mean, there's some circumstances that are different. We're a little deeper in the season too. So first, let's look at this. Travis Hunter is on IR. So the Texans will not see him in this matchup. How do you think that affects the secondary's approach to this game?
I mean, I didn't really look at him as like a receiver that you like, okay, he's on the bulletin board. We have to figure out ways to stop him. I feel that way about Brian Thomas Jr. I don't feel that way about Travis Hunter. So
what about defensively, or offensively as a corner as well? Sorry to interrupt, but just both sides of the ball. How would that affect it?
I mean, I think the corner aspect is probably the bigger blow, right? Like, I think he was playing better as a corner than he was as a wide receiver, making some plays here or there. Just he's a really good cover corner. I think that's where he probably needs to be, full time. I understand the want to be this dual threat, but that all depends on who's the signal caller for the Texans, to be honest. Like, while I think Davis Mills can, do all the things, I feel like I know CJ can, and this would be a key matchup, for me if I knew CJ was going to play, how he would be able to attack a defense down their, top corner. Arguably, we saw Nico Collins be able to break out a little bit with CJ, without CJ. So another game, after coming off an injury, I'd be excited to see what Nico could do in this matchup.
Yeah, and to be fair, we're pretty fresh from the CJ injury at time of recording, so we're not sure if he's going to play. I think precedent has been set that he probably won't. So we'll talk about both aspects of it, but I don't have high hopes that that's going to be the case. I'd love to be wrong and see him on the field, be massively beneficial. Looking at this Jaguars team in the last matchup, the Texans defense performed, I'd say, pretty well. It felt kind of like the offense falling apart didn't really give them a lot to work with. But how do you think things change this time around, being at home, with how the defense has played so far this season? Do you think that there's reason to believe that we should see a significantly better game all around from this team?
I think I would. I think the last two games you've had elite, premier pieces as far as like that they've been able to like really neutralize. In the Niners game, Christian McCaffrey had his worst game he's had in like I think it was like 6 years, something like that, before his Niner days. And then in this past game, you saw a Denver team that had lit up the scoreboard, for the last two games, and the Texans really held them in check for the majority of that football game. They let them get loose a couple times for touchdowns, but outside of that, they really didn't move the ball much. They limited Bo Nix to 175 passing yards, which in this day and age is just absolutely abysmal for a quarterback. I think his completion percentage was like 46% or something like that. So, I thought they did thought they did a really good job on Bo Nix. And I really feel like they're comparable, Bo Nix to Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is the more seasoned of the two, but they both want to do similar things. And I feel like this Texans defense having more tape and just really, really just having some home cooking too, it's going to set them up to really play really well against the Jags.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think that this defense is set to have a good game. I do think one of the important discussion points when having out this discussion is are the Jags who their record says they are, which gets to the discussion point of are the Jags good? This is a team that's 5-3. The Texans are 3-5, but if we look at their past few matchups, they squeezed out an overtime win against the Raiders on a failed 2-point conversion on the Raiders end. Got throttled by the Rams, had a very comparable game to us against the Seahawks in terms of point differential. And just overall, I mean, this is a game where we earlier this season lost 17-10. It was very the last second. It kind of reminds me of the Broncos game, except for the offensive ineptitude on the Texans end seemed a lot more severe in that one. So the question, I guess, is that in the time since that we've played the Jaguars, do you believe that they are as good as their record says they are?
I mean, I honestly, I would probably say no. I mean, I don't have this high regard for the Jags. I mean, they've got some good players, but I think they've underperformed. I think they've had a lot of turnovers, so that makes that really hard too. Obviously, the Texans know a lot about, going through offensive coordinators and stuff like that. So even if they were set up for success, I think I would like what the Texans have, versus what they have as far as on the offensive side of the football. Now, a lot of that depends on your signal caller, right? If we're talking about Davis Mills versus CJ Stroud, well then, advantage Jacksonville, right? For everything we want to say about Trevor Lawrence, he has shown flashes of being able to lead an offense and do just enough. He was able to do it against the Texans when they had CJ, so it's hard to discredit what they did in Jacksonville because there wasn't really this big key injury thing that kind of, was looming over the Texans' head. For the most part, I thought they were pretty healthy back then. I mean, that's not talking Joe Mixon or anything like that. I think there are some guys that the Texans have now as far as weapons that, they didn't feature in the first matchup that could be X factors. So we'll just have to see if the Texans can find a way, if Nick Caley can find a scheme with, whoever he's got at quarterback that just gets his team moving the football.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, I watched what the Colts did in hiring Shane Steichen, and I was one of the early ones who said, "Oh, if Daniel Jones, if they are going to start a quarterback that's going to make them do well, it's going to be Daniel Jones." Because he's a former first-round pick, a tool that Shane Steichen has a great offensive mind, should be able to mold to fit his offense as opposed to Anthony Richardson, because we saw that in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold. So I was like, oh, Liam Cohen, seems like a good offensive mind. Trevor Lawrence hasn't seen that in Jacksonville too much in his time. It should be a massive boost to him. And I think early on, looked really good as a team because of the defense, but I don't think that the Jaguars offense has exactly lit the scoreboard up outside of a few early games where the run game looked really good. But even recently, Travis Etienne has not looked great, and the run game has kind of slowed significantly for that team. So I think it's easy to say that the record probably is a bit more inflated than what how good this team actually is. And I look at the Colts and Jaguars the same way. I mean, they're both teams that have tougher stretches of their schedule later in the season. So we'll probably see them kind of fall back down to earth. It's one of the things that gives me optimism because I look in the rest of the Texans schedule, there's 9 games left, and I know for sure 5 of them are winnable. And the other 4, the Texans have played a bunch of one-score games and haven't won any of them. against the good teams. So I think they're due to win a close 1-score game. So if they can pull 2 of those, 10-win team ready to go, right? So I think that you ask the question of whether or not the Jaguars are good, because the reason it's asked is because it's a valid question. So interested in seeing how that goes for us. But like I said, this is a matchup we've already kind of gone over. There's some minor changes. I feel like we've covered a lot of it. So it might be a little bit of a short episode, but I want to move into the score predictions. Tom, how are we feeling?
I don't know. It's really tough. Like, if you told me CJ was going to play, I'd feel really good. I feel very, very confident about this team. As much as the fan base has a general love for General Mills, I don't know if he can finish the deal. You know what I mean? He'll make a couple plays, but how many points can we expect him to score? And yes, I know, he had that fateful game against the Colts where, he assured the second pick and all the lore, but it's really been inconsistent for Davis. And, it's entirely possible he could go out there and play great. And I think it's also entirely possible he could go out there and absolutely struggle. And we see, another game basically that looks like the second half against Denver. While Jacksonville's offense is kind of I feel like their defense is serviceable. So they're not just going to like hemorrhage points. You're going to have to go score against them. Very evident by the Texans' inability to do that with CJ Stroud. So to assume they're going to go and score, 21, 24, 28 points, it's kind of tough. So I guess best case scenario is what I'm going to go with. 17-10 Texans.
There it is. Flip it. Flip the score from the previous one. I like that. I think that you could realistically give 2 score predictions here if you wanted to say like with CJ or without. But by the time this episode drops, I think it'll be pretty apparent who's going to play. But I'm going to go ahead and do the same as you and just assume that Mills is going to play. I think that the Jaguars, all biases aside, I don't like saying this about division rivals, but like the Jaguars defense is really good. I don't think it's like at the same level as the Texans, but I do think it presents a challenge that's enough to give reason to believe that it'll be tough to score. So I think that it's going to fall on defense and special teams for the Texans to hold it down. I am going to take the Texans in this one, so we will get a storybook ending. I'm going to go similar to you. I might even shave a little bit off of it. I'm going to go 13-10 in favor of the Texans. I have to go 13 because I know the Texans are good for 2 field goals. You said it. It's been proven. Shout out to those who had Kaimi Fairbairn starting in fantasy this week. I had the pleasure of that in one of my leagues. So I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to say that it's a last-second field goal. It has to be, doesn't it? So it'll be 10-10 with 2 minutes left. Davis Mills will drive the Texans down the field and set up a Kaimi Fairbairn field goal. It's hard to give anything more than vanilla with Davis Mills in the game. Tough to believe there'll be any excitement outside of him maybe hitting a decently long pass to Nico Collins on the final drive that kind of puts us in range, and then setting Fairbairn up for a nice little 47-yard game-winning field goal as time expires. Not anything too exciting, nothing too flashy, just a game-winning field goal.
Not exciting at all. The fact that it's 10-10 with a rival in your building, like must-win game. Not exciting.
Not exciting at all. Just make sure you got your heart meds ready. You're going to need them.
Stressing everybody out.
Stressing everybody. Oh my goodness. Tom, do you have any final thoughts before we bring this thing to a close?
It's a must-win game. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no way around it. There's no more, anybody not named Colts Chiefs Bills is a must-win game for me.
100%.
So, and even one of those is probably a must-win game. Pick whichever one you want. So they got to get it done. If not, you're going to see James Roy roll out mock drafts. You're going to see Stressens roll out mock drafts. You're going to see all the mock drafts. So I don't want to see any mock drafts.
Honestly, might actually just pull up the mock draft simulator on the recap of that game and just actually talk about prospects.
The Texans
if it's a loss,
have the 27th pick in the draft. We're going to talk about all that and more on this edition of the Bullpen.
Oh man, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's a must win. If there's ever been any discussions from me that sounded pessimistic before, a loss this week would accelerate those to the max. It'd be really difficult. You lose one of your games that should be a win. You kind of put yourself in a position where you now have to win against either the Colts twice or the Bills or Chiefs. It's just not a good spot to be in. So here's to hoping for a win. But thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Bullpen, a little shorter, but that's just how it goes. When you play the same team twice, sometimes things just stay the same. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I've been James Roy. You can find me at James Roy NFL wherever you get your social media. Tom is TC Tom1 on Instagram and Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we are the Bullpen, the number one veteran-run Texans podcast in the multiverse.
All our variants equally good.
Thanks for tuning in. All of our variants are equally as good at talking about their prospective teams because there's 32 of us in the multiverse and we each root for the different teams, but all of us are the hosts of the number one veteran run podcast for our respective teams. That's the lore straight from the Texans variants. All right. Thanks for tuning in. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.